Hello and welcome to PANACEA Strategy 2, Adaptive Emotional Responses. We're going to go ahead and get into a little bit more depth with adaptive emotional responses beyond what we covered in the introductory course. So to begin, adaptive emotional responses are beneficial and healthy emotional responses to our life experiences. For example, sadness due to a loss, or experiencing anger due to a sense of injustice, and experiencing fear due to a threat are all natural emotions that lead to needed change and taking powerful and responsible action. Our society has placed a stigma on emotions, causing us to believe that they are weak. Yet the opposite is true. Denying our feelings and emotions lead to suppressed emotions and poor coping mechanisms. If we continue to suppress and fear our emotions and believe that having them makes us weak, they will have power over us. Emotion is not weakness, but takes courage to face and confront them. Our emotional health is like any other part of our well-being. We need to practice self-care with our emotions and take time to understand and work through them, just as we would take time out for routine exercise for our physical health and well-being. Emotions are energy in motion, and like water, constantly flowing. If we do not allow our emotions to flow through us, they will find a way to submerge and begin to flood like the breaking of a water dam. We can achieve a healthy peace of mind by first giving ourselves permission to fully express and release the accompanying emotion related to our presenting problem that is free of judgment and free of fear when confronting them. This is a critical process that will teach us how to regulate our emotions and develop adaptive emotional responses. Typically, when we begin to address our problems, we have unresolved emotions associated to them. In this section, we will show you how to surrender to your emotions without resistance so that you can learn how to make friends with the oftentimes dreaded emotions. This alleviates the paralyzing fear around these emotions. But you cannot heal until you learn how to surrender, which does not mean giving up, but letting go of control in order to achieve mastery instead. It means letting go of your past misfortunes and personal tragedies that were meant to transform you, but may be holding you back. It simply means to let go of your pain, of your beliefs that are no longer serving you, your pride, your ego deceptions, your illusions of fear, your limiting beliefs, your self-imposed prisons, and to fully let go of reliving the same reality and repeating the same lessons and cycles over and over again. To avoid the endless cycle and the reactive emotional patterns, and let go of the fear of feeling your feelings just as they are. To do this, you must first allow yourself to fully experience the emotions and embrace them just how they are and without trying to control them or hold them back. This will reduce their power over you, contrary to what people might think. So, reflection. What are some of the emotions you are experiencing now in relation to your presenting problem? These are most likely unpleasant feelings. So be sure to list as many as you can identify. And ask, are there any emotions you are holding back and attempting to avoid? Do you recognize any suppressed or repressed emotions that are still unresolved? Take time to really reflect on those questions. Emotions are a natural part of our being. Emotional suppression is caused by denying ourselves of feeling or expressing them, which leads to the majority of our emotional and mental health problems today. Catharsis is the process in which we relieve an emotion by fully purging and expressing suppressed feelings. To be emotionally liberated, emotions need to be freed rather than suppressed. Crying is a great catharsis for releasing grief, pain, anger, or other emotions that may be suppressed. Emotional catharsis is an important factor in our well-being. Think of this step as a healthy cleansing process for the soul that involves an emotional purge or release, which will prevent the repercussions of holding emotions in that can give rise to a host of other problems, including psychosomatic disorders. Imagine opening a window to let smoke out. After the smoke has escaped, we can see much clearer. When we resist the natural emergence of our feelings and fight this process, we actually feel worse. We begin to experience all the repercussions of suffering from many other emotional problems in hopes to avoid the fear of confronting the real feelings and emotions. As a result, we attempt to escape and avoid our emotions with maladaptive emotional responses and poor coping mechanisms. Here are 9 examples of ways that we can have a healthier way of responding to our emotions. Instead of avoiding our pain, learn how to work through it. Instead of withholding our tears, let them fall. Instead of closing your heart, open it. Instead of expressing hate, show love. Instead of getting angry, breathe and smile. Instead of judging another, appreciate them. Instead of being uptight and serious, be playful. Instead of fearing the unknown, move into it. Instead of operating from me, operate from we. The upside is we can feel free, clear-headed, and even liberated at times when we release our emotions from captivity. Beneath the layers of every negative emotion lies our primary fears. The greatest fears humans possess are all centered on the need for love. Therefore, the driving force behind all of our unpleasant feelings are fear-based, such as fear of not being loved, fear of having love taken from us, fear of being alone, fear of not being valued, and fear of not being authentically self-expressed. We each have the psychological need of being heard, validated, and understood, and to experience soul expression. When we discover that all of our emotions are either fear-based or faith and love-based, we can better understand what motivates our primary drives, including our getting and protecting behaviors, as Dr. Greg Bear discusses, all of which is an unconscious attempt to feel loved and worthwhile. In the introductory module, we introduced you to the common types of emotional responses adapted from emotion-focused therapy that represent interaction patterns found between partners and in intimate relationships. With the application of the mirror technique, we can more easily identify the emotional patterns and responses that our partners and significant others frequently use with us and that we use with them in turn to help identify our most common emotional responses. The goal is to avoid reinforcing these negative cycles by recognizing the emotional reactions and responses we use that are produced by negative beliefs and inherent programming that result in unfavorable outcomes in our lives. Effective healing strategies can allow us to replace maladaptive coping behaviors with emotionally adaptive responses to produce positive outcomes in our lives and in our relationships with others. So here is a brief review. Maladaptive or unhealthy emotional responses are generally dysfunctional responses conditioned by our past emotional experiences or are a consequence of inherited behaviors. Maladaptive responses are a result of unresolved, suppressed emotion that lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms. Reactive emotional responses are a defense against feeling the deeper, more painful emotions that we are afraid to witness, experience, and process, and include codependent behaviors that induce power struggles with others, such as what's demonstrated in the Cartman drama triangle. Manipulative emotional responses are experienced and expressed when we learn that our positive or negative emotions have an effect on others, and is typically used to get someone to pay attention to us, to get them to do something for us, to approve of us, or perhaps most often just not disapprove of us. Emotional self-awareness is the ability to recognize and understand one's own emotions. People with this competence are able to identify subtle differences in their emotions and know how their emotions affect their behavior, decisions, and performance. Adaptive healthy emotional responses refer to behaviors that enable a person to get along with his or her environment with the greatest success and least conflict with others. Behavior patterns change throughout a person's development, across life settings and social constructs, and changes in personal values. It is important to assess adaptive behavior in order to determine how well an individual functions in daily life. Acceptance is a critical step in developing an adaptive emotional response in dealing with the presenting problems in our lives. Acceptance is when one has become aware of a certain truth or reality, acknowledging what is and being okay with it. Awareness and acknowledging a problem always precedes healing and transformation, and is an important step to initiate change in the stages of change or trans-theoretical model. Now let's quickly go over some questions related to emotional responses. Which unhealthy emotional responses do you most relate to? Manipulative, maladaptive, reactive, or others? And if you recognize any reactive emotional responses, what deeper emotions do you believe you are avoiding and why? What poor coping choices or behaviors do you recognize within yourself as a result of suppressed emotions that you're ready to outgrow and change? Try to list at least 1 to 3. Reflection and introspection. These questions require you to be very honest with yourself. If you are unable to answer any of these questions or complete any of these exercises, you will need to explore deeper into your psyche to gain a better sense of emotional self-awareness. To experience emotion is to be human. If you are struggling to connect with your emotions, this is an indication of emotional disconnection, dissociation, or denial, which typically occurs due to trauma or painful emotional experiences from the past and is a source of a protection mechanism to avoid getting hurt and feeling the deeper feelings. In that case, you will need to revisit this section and strategy when you are ready. For now, complete this section to the best of your ability.